Okay, welcome to another webinar with Ken ISD. My name is Abri Nkuba, and I am going to be your host for today's webinar. I do have a number of clicks. We'll be kind of toggling between a couple of different screens here today. So just kind of bear with me as I make my way through. There will be some different points where I'll have to kind of switch the configuration of the screen. But just a couple of housekeeping items before we do get started. If you look right down in the chat window, there's a link to the slideshow that I put together for today's webinar. And sometimes, when I'm live streaming it here, depending on your connection speed or where you happen to be geographically, it works better for folks if they can download it. So that's kind of the Google Slides that go with this. So feel free to click that and just kind of click through it on your own. If you kind of put me in a little window over here to the side, you can kind of hear what I'm saying while you look at the slides on your own. Sometimes that works better for folks. Also, that second link, if you look at the second link we've got down there, is a blank lesson template that we use here in Ken ISD's Career Readiness Department when we're putting together lessons like the one that we're going to share, actually the several that we're going to share today. So let me go ahead and make a couple of clicks. I'll change kind of the configuration and we will get started. Okay, so this is going to be STEM in the Classroom with Ken ISD, so welcome to our webinar today. I'd like to introduce myself. If you see right there at the top is my name, Abri Nkuba. I'm a STEM consultant here at Kent ISD. I've been doing that. It's my third year for doing that. Before that, I was Aircraft Electronics, or Avionics as it says on the screen, instructor with Kent Career Technical Center, also here at Ken ISD. It's the Kent Career Technical Center, which is part of Ken ISD. I am still currently an adjunct aviation professor at Baker College, and that's as long as I've been in education. Before that, I was in airport operations for FedEx Express. I own my own company, Solom Imaging is listed there, and a lot of my background, all of my background, besides the education part, is aviation. So a couple of certifications there, aircraft electronics, I flight instruct. I'm an airframe and power plant technician, an aircraft electronics technician. I went to college, got a degree. I'm also rated in foreign object elimination. My partner, who's not with me today, he's actually out filming a video problem for use in a lesson similar to what we'll be talking about today. His name is Rick Mushing. He's also a STEM consultant. He also taught at Kent Career Technical Center as the engineering instructor. Was the owner of a global consulting firm and vice president of JVH Engineering, and he's a mechanical engineer by trade. So Rick and myself are the STEM consultants here at Ken ISD, and our contact information will be on a later slide. So if you see something you'd like to know more about, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about it. I would like to, just as kind of a housekeeping note, please go ahead and put your name, school, and grade down into the chat window on the bottom so that we know that chat is working on your end, and so we'll be able to communicate a little bit back and forth. As we go through the webinar today, feel free to post any questions that you might have just down in that area, and we'll get to those kind of towards the end. Depending on how many participants we have, I know several folks had signed up, but everybody can't always make it to a webinar when they sign up, and you always get the recording afterwards. So sometimes I sign up for them and don't attend either, just expecting to be able to watch the recording later. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in there, and we'll work through those. So STEM in the Classroom, webinar series here at Ken ISD. I'm going to talk about 4 things really today, and these webinars usually last right around an hour or so, so we'll probably finish up just a little bit before 5 o'clock. First thing we'll talk about is a STEM definition. So there's STEM, there's STEAM, heard of STEMX, a lot of different ways of putting that together. I just want to clarify, when we talk about STEM here at Ken ISD, what it is that we mean when we say that. I'd like to introduce you to a resource and some ways that you can use it, and then we'll kind of show some examples of how you might use that resource. So tonight's webinar is a little bit different than the past ones that we've done, than maybe you had advertised or had come in an email link. the webinars we have been doing is stuff that we've done out in a classroom, myself or Rick as STEM consultants working with a teacher, and we kind of show, hey, this is what we did in that classroom, this is how it worked. I usually have a teacher sitting here next to me, and he or she will say, yep, we did this, and this worked great, and this was a little bit tougher, I would change this, that type of format. But just due to kind of the testing season that we're in right now within education, K-12 education, really hard to get somebody's schedule to line up to show up and make themselves available here today. So it's going to be me solo, so we're going to do a little bit different format than the others that we have done, but reach out to me if you would like to see that type of material. All of the webinars are recorded, and I'll be able to show you several of those, and hopefully once we get kind of past testing, when we get to next month, we've been doing one of these a month this school year, we'd like to be able to get back to that format where we have a local educator in. So we'll talk about a STEM definition, and instead of having a teacher here, we'll talk about resource that we're developing for you here, ways you can use it, and then some examples and how to maybe test or try it. Okay, so when we say STEM here at Kent ISD, when I say STEM, what I mean is this. It's science, technology, engineering, and math, right? Those 4 disciplines. And they're used to solve a complex real-world problem. So when I say complex real-world problem, perhaps I mean we need a device box or package to hold a sensor that we're going to deploy on an unmanned vehicle, a drone, aerially, on the ground, or underwater. It needs to meet these criterion. Perhaps it needs to be waterproof, or it needs to be able to withstand a certain amount of wind, or it needs to be translucent so the camera inside could take a picture, those kinds of things. And then the science and the math that go into generating or developing a device that would be able to do that would be the problem that we're trying to solve. So maybe I'm going to use some geometry and trigonometry to figure out how I'm going to size and shape the thing, if I'm going to make a die or a mold that's going to be able to print that out, or I'm going to operate a machine that's going to mill it perhaps out of metal. So there's math involved there, there's science, and all those different disciplines, but we're using them to solve some type of business problem or in the adult world of work. And I don't say the real world, and I purposely try to avoid that statement because we're educators, right? We work in the real world too. Unless you have students that are planning on working in education, sometimes they ask, well, when am I ever going to get to use this? And if you have them do this type of work in your classroom, my experience has been they stop asking that and they really dig in and do the work. So use together to solve a real world problem. And let me move to my next slide. Whoops, clicked twice. Okay, so I'd like to show this video is what a business leader means when they say STEM. And actually, as I bring this up, I realize, oh, somebody's got a comment. I'm wondering if I've got an audio problem. Let me just check that really quick. Oh, perfect. Summer letting us know where she goes to school. Okay, so these videos, and this is kind of one of the limitations of Adobe Connect. This is an embedded YouTube video, and I cannot play this one from YouTube, and I would have had to have loaded it in Adobe Connect ahead of time. I forgot to do that here, so trying to think right now. I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of describe what Mr. Land says. Like I said, you've got access to this link, and if you download it for yourself, you'll be able to play it rather than me take up the time during the webinar like I'll do with some of these other videos. So Mr. Land talks about, you know, what he's looking for when he says STEM, and he's the it's a Skype recording, so forgive the quality of that recording if you have downloaded this and are playing it for yourself. But in short, he's the vice president of civil programs in engineering for Lockheed Martin, very large national defense contractor, but he works on the civil side, so for the stuff that's not military or militarized, different technologies that they develop, right? So he is talking about, you know, we've got a lot of different emerging careers that are coming forward, stuff that we had not known was going to be a big deal that is now a big deal or is projected to be. And, you know, maybe the military is trying to strategically position themselves to be ready to deal with what they perceive as maybe a future threat or to mitigate. A lot of times it's combining different disciplines. So maybe you're a sociological engineer, or maybe you're a flying mathematician, or you're a medical doctor who is also a mechanical engineer. Those kinds of disciplines where you've got somebody that can think both convergently, so you've got kind of a problem, you break it down into smaller parts, and you act on, kind of blow away the dust and act on that one answer. Whereas a creative person can take an idea and expand the idea and connect it in different ways and go off in different directions with it. That's something that he talks about in this video, where he's like, that's what I need for facing what is coming our way in terms of technology and just evolving careers. And he talks about some of the stuff that he sees and knows in his work that's coming that I can't even say some of the words. So pretty interesting, just a maybe 2-minute video clip. If you have some time, I would encourage you to watch that one. I did not preload it into Adobe Connect though, so we can't watch it together right now. All right, so this is the resource. Excuse me, take a drink of water here. This is the resource that I would like to introduce the folks on the webinar to. So what I'm going to do is I have to make a couple clicks, but this is kind of the graphic identifier. STEM, the part of the organization that I'm a part of, reports to Career Readiness. So Career Readiness within Ken ISD. So you got Ken ISD is the umbrella organization. We've got a Career Readiness department, and I work in Career Readiness at STEM. So if we click on this, or if you have downloaded this and you click on it, what it's going to do is it's going to bring you over to our YouTube page. And our YouTube page is, we're really developing this pretty quickly. It looks like Ted Ed has subscribed to our channel, which is, it's actually very flattering. Ted Ed's a big deal. So when you look at this, and there's Rick, there's a picture of Rick down at the bottom as well. So there are multiple videos here, and we're uploading more of them every day as fast as we can. And let me just tell you real short what these are about. Okay, and we've got that logo. I wanted to show you guys that logo so you'd be able to see, okay, I know I've gotten to the right page when I see that logo. What we do is we go in and we talk to a business partner, a local business, and we explain to them, hey, talk about who you are, how you got to where you are, some business problems that you deal with or things that you face, and kind of pose a problem to a pretend group of students, because I'm just standing there talking to them, I've got my camera pointed at them. Pose a problem or give a scenario, the type of work that you do, and then we'll take it back to a classroom and maybe be able to turn it into a lesson, right? So we talked about STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math used together to solve those business problems or adult world of work problems. Well, where are we going to get all those problems from? That's what we're trying to bring to the forefront is, hey, here's an entire library of these things. And I think so far we've got, I don't know, 13, 14 or so in here. And we're going to click through several of them. And one of the things that we find when we talk to these people, they're very willing to work with us as educators. They say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about it. I'll answer any questions you've got. Yes, 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 I'll totally do it. But then we get that video footage, we got to bring them back and get it processed so it looks halfway decent for you guys. Make sure that we didn't capture anything proprietary or patient information, HIPAA, that kind of thing. So we scrub it for that, and then we send it to the business partner, and they vet it through their human resource or legal or whoever it happens to be. So a lot of work kind of on the back end to make these available to you. And one of the reasons that we do that is because we know it can be very challenging to teach every day. I was in the classroom for several years. I still actively teach, and it's challenging to do the work of teaching and also do the work of really anything else, frankly, and still have some kind of a life. So we're trying to do a lot of that legwork for you, make it very accessible to educators. So know that these are here, and we're going to click through several of these and look at them together. Let me go back to my webinar page then. Just got to make a couple clicks here. There we go. So that's kind of the introduction to that resource. And again, I want to explain just kind of another layer on that. When we think about this, we're trying to get you, like I said, into the door of a business partner, and that's actually text that you'll see hopefully in the description of each of those videos. We want students to be able to virtually explore careers, right, and connect their academics to industry practices. So it's tough sometimes to have a to connect that content, for the students and say, hey, look, a very strong case or a very strong reason to learn this is you might do it for a job someday. And it's important to do it for a job because that can create income, and income can create quality of life, and quality of life is important to you and your someday future family. So we want students to not just for those reasons, kind of the economic reasons, but also to recognize there is a real reason other than us as teachers trying to teach stuff to them why we want students to learn this content. Every area of our content has been developed because we as society and culture have deemed it necessary to know and be able to do certain things. So at the end of it, the important part is being able to know and do certain things. So giving that some kind of rationale and being able to vet that, and a lot of times through work in our society, seems to work really well. So that's what we want to do. There are, like I said, lots more of these coming. We're filming, editing, and posting these regularly. In fact, like I said, Rick's out today. I think he filmed 2 more. I've got another one tomorrow that I'll be filming. I did 2 or 3 last week. So they're coming. It's developing. And we're hoping that as part of normal practice, all of the classroom learners out there will be able to become accustomed to seeing their academics couched in that adult world of work. So it's not just, I have to do this to get a grade, or tell me what the answer will be, or give me the study sheet so I can pass the test, but learning becomes a powerful thing because I want to learn. I want to know. I want to be a competent adult. And that's really what we're looking for. And that helps with a number of things, student engagement. That helps with students, taking time to listen, to really dig in and attach their thinking, kind of those reflective processes where they think about, geez, if this triangle, mathematics relates to not just what's on my test, but also the truss structure in the roof that holds my home up, or the truss structure in the roof over my school building where I'm learning it, maybe it has a little bit more connection and meaning. We aren't wanting to replace field trips with this resource. We're hoping that students are, students are more out in business and kind of learning what's going on and getting a sense for their own career maturity, who they are and what they might want to be and do. And we're hoping that this isn't used as kind of just that special thing that you do at the end of a unit of learning, and we all do that, kind of a capstone project or a capstone event or thing. But we want these videos to be used as standard practice. We want it to become regular, that students see and recognize that the content that they're using and learning, their academics, are important to hopefully someday their life. And we want to give examples of local businesses that are willing to say, hey, that content's important in my daily life. Here's what I do for a living. So we have some suggested usages for these. We're obviously open to however you want to make use of the resource. You could use these as a lesson kickoff, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. You could use them as kind of an introduction for a unit of learning, or perhaps a guided question for problem-based learning, kind of more that, okay, here's a problem, students wrestle with it and be very explicit about, hey, here's the chemistry that I need you to learn when you're doing this, or here's the English language skill set that this person in their job is using, and that's what we're going to learn about. Project-based learning, and again, project versus problem, perhaps you're familiar with both of those terms, project-based learning or problem-based learning. I personally like to use, and we here in Career Readiness like to use problem-based learning, because a project can be a project just kind of for a project's sake. But if you're solving a problem, the reason you're solving it and the materials and the content and the knowledge you have to use to solve it is because that's implicit, right? You want to solve the problem. So we like to use problem-based learning. And we also just wanted to point out, hey, these are bimodal. By that we mean you can start with your standards, your content area standards, Michigan Science standards, Common Core state standards, whatever it is you've got, and then kind of link that to your video. Or you could kind of peruse through the videos and position them to cover standards perhaps in different areas, and we're gonna chat a little bit about what I think that could look like. So let's see. Our first one up here is real-world STEM communication. So this is kind of if we were going to use one of these videos as a unit intro, right? So that we're going to introduce a unit to our classroom. What would it look like to use one of these videos to do that? And I've got some links here to some suggested standards, so we'll debrief that. But let's just take a minute, and again, I have to make a couple of clicks, but let's just take a look at this video here. So let me come over here and pick that. And let's take a listen.
Hi, my name is Ian Mortensen. I'm the shop manager for SA Mormon, and I handle all of the manufacturing and fabrication of doors and frames for hollow metal for the company. We're going to go out to the shop floor and show an example of when something goes wrong, of what we have to do to fix it because the math wasn't correct. So what we have here is a door that is an existing door going into a new frame. Somewhere along the way, the math wasn't quite right, so all four of these hinges have to be moved to match the new frame. In order to do that, we have to go and cut an 1/8 inch off of each of these openings and slide everything down. We've had to fill in the holes that were here for the hinges, weld them in, re-drill them, and then re-tap them. So when we're done, it'll look like the holes we have up here. Once all this work is done, we have to make all the cuts disappear so it looks like a door that came from a factory, which means lots of sanding and grinding.
Okay, so that's kind of a quick intro, and let me make a few clicks here, and we'll get back to my screen here. Okay, so if we were going to use that as a way of introducing whoops, move forward one. Yeah, practice kind of a lesson kickoff. So if we were going to use this as a lesson kickoff, maybe we're going into a unit where we're going to teach fractions, right? We're going to teach fractional math, and there he mentioned, got to have the math has to be set up right. We measure from the bottom of the door, and again, that's another mathematical topic, right? These topics just keep kind of tumbling out of our mouths, and sometimes it's hard to kind of take that idea and break it down and realize, some teacher somewhere along the way taught me how to measure. So in this case, this guy's, he's got to remeasure, in this case, the door, because somebody along the way had said, yep, I want my hinges placed here, here, and here, and turns out that actually wasn't right. They forgot to add an 1/8 of an inch for kind of the space around the door. So they went back, and he's got to take it and cut it up, and once he's got it cut up, he's got to, drill new holes and kind of do all of that work. So as just a lesson kickoff, that could actually be, I think, very useful when we're talking about, hey, this is going to be, kind of some fractional math. It's important to know that fractional math. Not knowing it can cost time, it can cost money, extra labor, unhappy customers. And then I'd like to see, if you've got some thoughts on, how could you use this? Just kind of throw them down in the chat box. How would you use a lesson, or maybe wrap a lesson around a video like that where somebody's saying, yeah, I use fractions all the time. I make doors, and when the measurements are off, I got to go back and fix it, and this is what that looks like. So just kind of throw some chat ideas down in there on that. So that would be maybe a lesson kickoff. How else could we use a business that's explaining, hey, this is what I see every day? So I wanted to take a look at some communication. I feel like sometimes within STEM, we don't always think about our ELA friends there, and I have a big problem with that, because I actually, how would I say this? Funny, I'm talking about ELA and stumbling across my words. So being able to articulate very clearly what it is you mean, whether it's by math or engineering, or when I'm talking on a radio flying an airplane, or communicating with a flight student, or anything like that, I feel like we have to use very, very precise language, particularly in the sciences. And again, I'm a STEM consultant, so that's kind of the angle I come at this from. But the language is just so doggone important. And I feel like we could really leverage that, and some of the initiatives that I see and hear are out there and that I get to work with when I work with teachers is reading across the curriculum, things like that. So I'd like to take a look here at somebody who communicates professionally for their job, and just kind of take a look at how could we maybe use this. So these are some ELA and literacy standards I have linked in here. Feel free to kind of click on those, or I can show you a couple of them here. So what did I have? I had 3 of them that I thought would tie in nicely to this video. So let's let that load up for a second. So the first one is speaking and listening. You need to be able to present your claims and findings, emphasizing important or salient points in a focused and coherent manner. And when you see this video, I think you're really going to understand what I mean by that with this guy. Valid reasoning, well-chosen details. In this guy's case, the work that he does, details can literally mean the difference between life and death. Let's take a look at another one. So analyze how a text or a manual or some document, analyze how text makes connections among and distinctions between individuals or ideas or events. So this is some of our 8th grade informational text reading standards. So I thought that would tie in nicely with this. Then I also wanted to point out another kind of piece of informational text to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of using different mediums to present a particular topic or idea. You'll find that in this man's work, he actually has multiple choices for how he can choose to communicate to someone. So I'm just going to bring the video up. I got to make a few clicks here. I'm going to bring the video up, and we'll watch that together.
Good afternoon. My name is Zach Blumke, and I work at AirMed Spectrum Health, and I'm a flight communications specialist. What we do here, this is our little communications center. As you can see, we got a whole lot going on here, and it gets kind of hectic with a flight request, or if the crew is out and about, hopefully saving lives. The original call, or any call for that matter, for first responders, comes through us. And let me just quick walk you through a little scene that we had, say, like yesterday. Kent County scene, the sheriff's department over there gave us a call. It was a 2-car pileup, 1 pin-in, which means that obviously one person was pinned in against a tree. Pretty severe circumstances. So what we do, we get the original call, we tone our crew out here. What we always have is at least nurse, physician, and obviously our pilot. With that said, when they all enter the room, hopefully we get a ground contact over there that they can speak with, that we conference them in. So they kind of get a general idea of what's going on in the scene, what they can prepare for, what they can pack, whether that be blood, special medications, or anything like that. So I will enter it into this little geography cheat sheet we have up here, the DeLorean we call it. And for this one in particular, it was on 18 Mile Road, and the other street address. So we can kind of narrow it down, get an LZ for our pilot, or landing zone as it's called, and get our north, west, all that latitude, longitude that we learned. We pass that along to the pilot. If weather is good and everything, we tell the people on scene, say, hey, we'll be shipping out of here, hopefully be there as soon as possible. And obviously an aircraft will be the fastest responder, so that's why we get called half the time. So once we ship out, get on scene, our physician, nurse treat the patient accordingly, and they pass along, like I said earlier, with our little radios right here. After that, we communicate with the hospital to find out where they're going. Chances are for us, we will be going to Butterworth. However, that's not always the case. We can go anywhere in the state. Ideally with Butterworth, if we go to triage or the emergency room, something like that, our doctor will conference in or go through Med Channel 2 right here. We'll pass that through so the receiving doctor kind of has an idea of what's going on, what they can prepare for, and again, get medications ready, contact family members, and have everything kind of set in stone, or, worst case scenario is get the operating room ready or something along those lines. When they ship off from the scene, when everything's good, patient's all loaded up, we contact security, and as you can see up here, we got what they call the helipads, where they land. We're always keeping an eye on the aircraft wherever they're moving, with our little EMS tracker here. Once they land at the hospital, we say down safe, make sure the crew is all good. The pilots actually bring in another contact phone, so say we get another call, we can at least communicate with them while they're in the hospital, you know, just in case. It's always a little backup scenario. As we have here is our little golden hour dispatch center. That's where we keep all the patient information, where we track what the pilots say, whoever contacts us, all of our logging goes through golden hour. Write down everything, make sure everything is documented. So that comes in communication skills, social studies skills. I mean, we're using all types of different things here. And as a recent college graduate, I mean, I can truthfully say I'm using a lot of different things that they taught me, not just in college and high school. There's definitely benefits to taking all sorts of classes, health, you know, science, biology, social studies. Communication obviously is the biggest one for me because that's what I do these days.
Okay, so let me make a few clicks here and we'll get back to working together here. There we go. Okay. So again, just if that was a unit intro, my suggestion is, yeah, you know, there's several different components that man mentioned that he works with. You notice he had several different communication mediums. He's got, in his case, he's got like 4 or 5 phones sitting next to him. He can send text messages across the monitors on all of his computers. He's taking in information, excuse me, from multiple sources. So he's taking in all this information and synthesizing it into knowledge that either needs to be passed on to one party or another. So I'm suggesting that in terms of kind of a technical reading and in an ELA unit, that could work very nicely as a unit intro. And maybe then you play it again kind of toward the end and wrap up and say, okay, based on what we've learned in this unit, you know, how do you see this guy using those skill sets? And you know, sometimes we couch this stuff kind of in a problem-based scenario. If we say, okay, students, you've all been recruited into, you know, in this case, Aeromed Spectrum Health, and you're going to be working in their emergency communications department, their dispatch office, like the young man we just saw, and you're going to need to be able to gather information from multiple sources and pass it along. And you need to decide, am I going to do it verbally? Am I going to send it textually? Am I going, you know, what am I going to write down in my report that has to go into that golden hour system that he talks about at the end of the video? You know, what do I have to record? And paying very special attention to detail. In his case, you know, if he misspeaks a specific type of medicine or or mistypes or miswrites a specific you know, a blood type or a location or a latitude, longitude, that can be a big problem in his case. So I feel like it could be used in multiple ways there. So that would be a practice, our practice for kind of a unit intro. How could we use this as a unit intro? So then I wanted to talk about, okay, what if we were using this as kind of our guiding question? So, you know, whoops, I think that's, no, good. Go back one. There we go. So if we were going to use kind of these videos as a guiding question, so your guiding question is intended to focus your students on inquiry. What is it that we're trying to learn? What are we trying to get to here? What do I want you to have, student, as a takeaway knowledge, skill set, capability that's demonstrable on, you know, either a test or assessment or out in the adult world of work, something like that. So guiding question, how could we use these as a guiding question? And in this case, we're going to talk about kind of more the pure science side, the genetics and biology. And again, I just wanted to mention kind of that problem-based learning. I'm going to click on a couple of these standards here. We can take a look at what I'm suggesting we might be able to use here in terms of what standards are we trying to address. And this is, I don't know, probably my 10th time on the Michigan State Science Standards website. So I need to, I need to perform a search here in order to show you the 2 standards that I had suggested we might be able to use these with. So it's ETS 1 and 2 for high school, and I went high school on these. Find. There we go. So ETS 1-2 is design a solution to a complex real-world problem by breaking it down into smaller, and there's that real world again. I don't particularly care for that because we work in the real world as educators, but real world problem by breaking it down into smaller, more manageable problems that can be solved through engineering. So if you're not familiar maybe with the Michigan Science Standards, the new Michigan Science Standards have been adopted as of, don't quote me on this, I think it was November this year that they were officially adopted. So I've got those linked in there. So, and in that, they include engineering design as several of these. And a lot of our videos deal with engineering type problems, whether in this case it'll be biomedical engineering, or in the earlier case mechanical, when you're dealing with how am I going to get this door and the structures to fit together, or in the other guy's case it's more kind of a system. It was more communication side. So a lot of different engineering content. And then so that was ETS 1 and 2, design a solution by breaking it down into smaller problems. And then life science 3-3. So let's see if I can find that one real quick, and we'll just kind of look at that before we watch the video. So we come over here and we're doing a quick search for LS 3-3. So this is under our life science, right? So in our life science, apply concepts of statistics and probability to explain the variation and distribution of expressed traits in a population. So let's go back over here and we'll just watch this video together a minute. Again, I got to make a couple clicks in order to make it show on the screen here, just by virtue of using Adobe Connect. So forgive me as I make a few clicks. And we're going to watch Real World STEM Genetics and Biology for you guys. Hang on here.
My name is Jonathan Carnes. I'm the Director of Laboratory Operations at NextGen MDX. We are a genetic carrier screening company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we deal on a day-to-day basis with helping patients understand what genetic conditions that they carry, and as a result, if they are to have kids with their partner, what would the chances be of them having a child with one of the diseases that they carry. A genetic carrier is somebody who carries a disease but doesn't suffer from the disease. They do have the risk of passing it on to their children, though. One of the day-to-day questions that we can often get in the laboratory has to deal with a doctor who's trying to figure out what is wrong with a patient and what is the underlying genetic cause for whatever their condition is. We actually got contacted by a doctor who had a patient who was having shortness of breath, difficulty exercising, and the physician had already decided to look at the patient's blood under a microscope. When he observed the blood, he noticed that a number of their red blood cells were lysing, and that means that the red blood cells are breaking open. Red blood cells are what carry the oxygen to the different parts of our body, and so the broken red blood cells are not carrying oxygen the way they need to, and hence the patient is feeling out of breath because they're not getting enough oxygen to all of the different parts of their body. The doctor asked us to look at the patient's DNA and try and figure out if there was a genetic condition that could cause this effect on the red blood cells. As a result, we told the physician that we could look at the red blood cells and try and figure out if there is a gene present in the patient's DNA that could cause that red blood cell condition to occur. How would you solve this problem? We solved this problem by looking at PubMed Central, which is a online repository of a number of different medical publications that can cause that allow us to look at the different causes of diseases that have been discovered by other researchers. We started to do some research on different genes that could cause red blood cells to lyse, and one of the genes that we ran across was called G6PD. Changes in G6PD, mutations in G6PD, which are changes to the genetic code, can cause the red blood cells to lyse when a patient's exposed to certain foods and to certain drugs. We found that this patient, when we looked at their G6PD gene, had a mutation that can cause those red blood cells to lyse, and we were able to share that with the physician, and the physician was able to counsel the patient to avoid certain foods, and then the physician was able to put into the patient's record that the drugs that can also interact with G6PD and cause those red blood cells to lyse should be avoided in that patient's care. Once the patient was aware of these things, they were able to avoid those foods, and physicians were able to avoid prescribing any of those drugs, and they were able to get better, and the condition went away as their body slowly replaced those red blood cells that had been lysed.
Okay, I'll do a couple of clicks here and we'll go back to our presentation. All right, so in this case, he actually asks the question right in there. And he says, okay, if you were faced with somebody asking you, well, geez, you know, what's causing this genetic disorder? What's happening to this person that's causing this? And they were able to go in and do some research. And I actually stopped the video right there and kind of put in a, you know, hey teachers, we're going to have the answer to this problem coming up shortly. So if you wanted to just use this as a guiding question, and notice that he talked about a couple different things. He talked about genetics and how these things can be passed on from you know, generation to generation. But the other piece of this that he talked about was actually the engineering of blood, right? Like what it is comprised of. You got platelets, you got white blood cells, you got red blood cells, you got plasma, different pieces. And in this case, they took the blood problem and they broke it down into, okay, well, which part of the blood is actually the problem? Turns out it was the red blood cell. So then, okay, it's the red blood cell. Now we need to go and do some research and find out what can cause that to happen with a red blood cell. And they found out that in some cases it's, you know, different foods, sometimes it's allergies, sometimes, you know, the different things that he was describing there. So I feel like in that case, the guy actually asks the question, and one of the things that some of the time we struggle with kind of coaching an employer up in a way to put a video together for us for this is, you know, can you ask a question at the end of it? You know, ask the students, how would you solve that? Because that really gets us down to, okay, students, the gauntlet has been laid. Try and solve the problem that employer is solving, you know, right down the street. So my suggestion there is, hey, I feel like that could be used in genetics, biology, maybe in, you know, some middle school science. Just depends on the level that you're teaching at. All right, so here, and I kind of already hinted at this, but in this case, I wanted to just mention that bimodal piece, right? So a lot of times in teaching, we say, okay, what standards is it that I have to cover? What are they going to be assessed on? I need to make sure my students know the stuff they need to know. And then we say, all right, what then do I need, you know, kind of, well, it's the reverse engineering design process, but we say, okay, what do I have to have at the end? What steps do I, you know, what will be acceptable evidence of that? And what do I go backwards from there? What experiences do they need to have in the classroom in order to be able to give me that evidence that they learned the right thing, and then be able to have it show on my unit test or whatever I'm giving at the end, or high stakes test or whatever it is we're looking at. So we can go both ways with this. We could take these videos and wrap our content around them, but I'm also suggesting in this case we could start with that video and kind of set it up to cover maybe two different areas. In the one case, he was talking about genetics and how those things can be passed on, and there's different traits that can be passed on. But he also was talking about the structure of blood and how the red blood cell is used in different parts of the body to do different things, really to kind of carry the oxygen around, which in my actual industry is very, very important. So he covers that design of the blood. So you could set this video up. My suggestion is you could set this video up to deal with your genetics and engineering standards, or you could set this video up to be used over here on kind of maybe a middle school, you know, what is blood made of kind of level, and it could go both directions. So we've kind of reached the end of today's content webinar. We're going to have some question and answers here in a minute, but let me make a couple clicks here. We do have one more webinar coming up for 2015-2016 school year. That'll be on May 17, 4 to 5 p.m. We'd love to have you join us for that. Also just want to say, hey, go ahead and stay in touch with us. The STEM consultants, Avery and Rick, our names are listed here, our emails I should say. Feel free to email us you know, if you'd like some support with some of the, how do I use these videos, or could you come in and talk about something, or you know, whatever it happens to be. Then we've also got a website there. I've given you the link for that. Please click on that and kind of click around and see if there's some resources there that you might be able to use. We've also got this pretty neat Google community going where a number of teachers will, you know, comment or talk, or Rick and I sometimes will post, our supervisor, Mr. Jared Grandy, posts things that we see emerging in business and industry that are applicable to different content areas. So take a look at that. Also want to just give kind of a quick background on our career exploration coordinators, and I'm going to switch the way the screen looks here so we can see that a little better. Oh shoot, I misspelled Lindsay's last name in her email there. She's going to kill me. So it's actually Lindsay Tilley with a Y on the end at kenisd.org. But let me tell you about our career exploration coordinators. So you can write kind of the generic email there, but what Lindsay does is she works with IT and computing companies locally to do two things. Students at the high school level, usually, middle school level though also, can go out to an IT or computing facility and learn what that job is like, learn about algorithmic thinking, ascertain, you know, if-then statements, things like that, and be exposed to that as a career. And sometimes she can also get those folks to come into a classroom and be talking to your students in your classroom. If you can't get your students out, maybe we can pull those folks in. So Lindsay does that work in IT and the computing fields. Krista Harmon is our career exploration coordinator that does that same type of work, but she works in healthcare. So healthcare is emerging like crazy around here. We've got a bunch of healthcare manufacturing firms locally. Obviously the Medical Mile down on Michigan Street in Grand Rapids getting to be a really big deal. Lots of students thinking, hey, I'd like to be a physician assistant, an LPN, a registered nurse, a nurse practitioner, a nurse anesthetist, all different kinds of, you know, radiologists, whatever. Dental hygienists. She also works with folks that work in like nutritionists. So anything to do with healthcare, Krista does that same thing. Your students can go out and see that work. They do something called a talk and tour series. So in talk and tour series, your students get to meet kind of about this time of day actually, and go around through a business. They encourage I think they actually have to bring their parents. And you go and do a walkthrough, and you hear the people that are working at that firm explain, hey, this is the work that I do every day. And then last but certainly not least is Amy Pierce. In terms of career exploration coordinators, Amy Pierce does that same type of thing, but she works in engineering, manufacturing, and construction. So she'll bring folks into your classroom, or your students get to go out and see that work happening live in the field. In addition to Rick and myself as the STEM consultants and our 3 career exploration coordinators, we also have a career readiness consultant. His name is Eric Kelleher. And he works kind of on that soft skills side where, okay, students, how is it that you're going to go and get a career like that someday? What is it like to interview for a job? How do you engage social media? How do you present yourself on a resume in a very high quality way in order to get the interview? We also have a blog, and this is probably my favorite link here is our blog. We'll write and let you know about different programs that we have, or just kind of some thoughts that we have around general career readiness. Careerreadiness.wordpress.com. Take a look at that. You can sign up to get notifications when one of us posts something on there. So please stay in touch with us here in Career Readiness. We're here to serve you. We want stuff to work for you and your students. I've got one more quick video that I'd like to share, so I'm going to make a few clicks, and I'll share one more video before we get kind of here towards the end. Hang on. So this is an example of what I would say career readiness and STEM career readiness is not.
Dad, can you help me with my math? Mr. Shackelford says if I don't learn it, I won't be able to function in the real world.
Okay, now what you got to do is go down the road past the old Johnson place, and you're going to find 2 roads, one parallel and one perpendicular. Now keep going until you come to a highway that bisects it at a 45-degree angle. Solve for X.
So I enjoy that video just because of kind of the tongue-in-cheek way that it's being mentioned there. And again, it's not that you know, nobody gives directions like that, right? That has not got a relationship to the real world, or I should say the adult world of work. Oh, I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing there. There we go. So as you think about how can I get my students to understand, hey, this is how this content can be used, this is where it's being used by somebody that has a career related to this. We just wanted to let you know that that's a resource that's out there and that's available, and we're here in Career Readiness to help you guys out. Also, here at Kent ISD, we have a number of different webinars. If you go to our website, kentisd.org, we keep, if you click on then professional learning, you can see all the different webinars that we have. I think nearly all of them are archived and recorded like today's is. So please make yourself, what am I trying to say? Now that you're aware of that, feel free to use that resource. I don't see any questions. I did see right down in here, one of our participants, Summer, had said, hey, I might use the fractional math video for an introduction to dimensional analysis rather than fractions. It would take another problem added to the original, but it would get the students thinking about measurements. I'm actually working on a unit right now at our Kent Innovation High School, specific actually to dimensional analysis and inscribed circles and inscribed triangles. In geometry and trigonometry class over there. We're designing some airspace, so we're going to do an airspace design, and when I fly a practice approach, the content, the document that I use to be able to fly and not see outside when we're in the clouds, we're actually having the students step through that process on, well, how do you actually build airspace that keeps things from colliding with ground or obstructions or radio towers, or comes around mountains and all the airplanes can come in. So that would be something maybe Summer, you could get a hold of me and we could do some work on. We have reached the end of our time though on the webinar. How might you suggest testing or checking for understanding? Here's a question. How might you suggest testing or checking for understanding if using this resource for project or problem-based learning? That's actually a great question. That pretty much always comes up when we do one of these webinars, or even when we're out working with teachers on this type of stuff. So something that we find is you need to be very explicit kind of on the front end of that project. Hey students, this is the math or this is the science that we're using in this, right? And that's where problem-based learning you can get what we call scope creep, right? So it can become this giant thing, because in the adult world of work, nobody pays me to sit around and do math problems on a piece of paper. They don't pay me to write text unless it's for this specific thing. So you're going to be using multiple different content areas and pieces of knowledge, so you can get that scope creep. But if you let the students know, hey, yeah, I'm going to want you to explain it or give a presentation at the end of the unit, or maybe I'm going to give you my standard test, the same test that I used when I taught this class last year. That same test, it's going to be the same test, but we're going to learn it in a different way now. We're going to learn, I'll keep talking about inscribed circles since that's on my brain right now. So I want you to learn how you can find the arc tangent on a specific setup, but we're going to learn how that works by designing, okay, I've got a radial line that comes out here, and I need to know that arc length. I said arc tangent before, arc length. I need to know this arc length out here so I can tell the pilot how far they need to fly this direction before coming inbound. You can use your same exact test. You just need to be explicit and let the students know, hey, while you're doing this, this is the math that I want you to use, or this is the science I want you to use, or this is the English, or this is the history, or whatever it happens to be. That's what you're going to be assessed on. You let them know up front, hey, this is what you're going to be tested on. That's how I'm going to have you learn it. So we're just going to learn it differently. The assessment doesn't necessarily need to change a whole lot. You might use some of your specific examples from the learning unit back on that test. You could do that, but I don't suggest changing your assessments a whole lot. You can switch into like an authentic assessment. You could switch and have them actually make a thing in some of these, but that would be different than I'm taking your question as traditional assessment, either pen and paper or online, the new version of pen and paper. So I would say that the assessment can stay the same. You just need to be explicit with the students and let them know, hey, this is what you will be tested on at the end of this. So we've gotten to the end, like I say, of our webinar time today. So I'm going to go ahead and click off of this. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next one and for more next year. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.